So what color is a rainbow? The conversation that's listed in the upper left-hand corner of the screen was a conversation I had with one of my twins when he was 11 years old. There was a beautiful double rainbow in front of us in the sky. You could see all the colors in the rainbow. And so I said, how many colors do you see? I know that you know the color spectrum. You've learned that in school. But how many colors do you actually see? And he said, I see two. One is green and the other is blue, or maybe purple. And I said, well, what color do you see above the yellowish green? And he said, sky. All he was seeing in the rainbow, the beautiful rainbow that was in front of me, was two shades of color. Each year in school, we've had to tell their teachers about their color vision deficiencies. And the teachers always say, I've never had anybody in class who's been color vision deficient. And we always have gone through the description of how, yes, they probably have. Now that the boys are in college, it's on them. If they want their professors to know, they have to tell them. They do not readily ask for help, and they'd rather muddle through than ask and admit that they need help. Even when taking a class in heating and air, which requires correctly wiring things, one would rather get it right through trial and error than ask a partner or the teacher. I've quit trying to figure out why. They're adults. So what is the purpose of color? There are three different purposes for color, and it's important to think about how that color is being used to determine how much adaptation you need to make. So if the color is providing information, make sure that there's another means of getting that information. So if you're color coding and red has a particular meaning, make sure that you have that meaning written out somewhere in words or symbols or another way of telling that information. The color might just be representing something. If that's the case, is it important that they know that representation through the colors? If so, you might want to provide, or you should provide, another means of getting that representation. Or is the color only used for aesthetic purposes? For the majority of the population, we want things to look pretty. Colors help things look pretty. But if that's really the only purpose of the color, then you might not need to make adjustments just for those that see color differently. What are some considerations that make these adaptations controversial? First of all, there's a lack of a legal requirement. As we talked about before, color vision deficiencies are not considered disabilities under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And there's no legal requirement to make accommodations at the college level unless you know about that disability, which has to be self-disclosed by the students. The complexity of the condition is important as well. There are so many different forms of color vision deficiencies. It can take so many different, looks so different to different people. So it's a very complex condition. And we're also concerned in higher education at preserving the academic rigor. We don't want to water down our content. We don't want to make things simpler, but we do want to make things accessible. Every student in the class should have access to the information that you're providing in your class. If color is a subjective experience, and students with color vision deficiencies have figured out coping skills and they're good at coping, why bother making adjustments? First of all, color discrimination has been shown to be vital to memory. People learn better when color helps them organize their thoughts and their information. There are consequences that can be mitigated by making adaptations. So if you know that that color is going to be a distraction or be a problem in learning, then you can stop that, control for that, before you have your learning opportunity. So how can you enhance access for all students? Remember, there are many different possible ways people might see color. It's not a one-stop shop. So be intentional about your design. Use high contrast. Think about the colors that you're using. Think about the combinations of those colors. You might even ask some students about color combinations you're considering using to make sure that it's accessible to all in the class. Be aware of potential problems. A student might seem to be acting out, might seem to be misbehaving, might seem to be intentionally giving you the wrong answer, but it might be that he or she does not understand or even see the information that you're providing. So a simple discussion outside of class might help resolve this and might help you get to the background of what's really going on. As we talked in Universal Design for Learning, allow them to be creative in the responses, in the ways that they provide information back to you. And take a look at your textbooks and other learning materials to identify potential problems, potential points of confusion before you assign those materials. If you have a textbook that has a lot of color graphs, color maps, are they using other ways of providing that information, such as texture and design, or labeling with words or numbers? Make use of specific talents of students. There are studies that show that some students with color vision deficiencies demonstrate an increased ability to recognize patterns, and there are some studies that also show some are able to see camouflage better. They're looking more at things other than color. They're looking at texture, they're looking at line, they're looking at design, but they're not looking at the color. So they're able to determine these other things. Those are talents you can use in the classroom. Add shading and texture. Using color lightness at the boundaries of objects helps enhance that color. Choose your color palettes carefully. So you want to avoid common combinations that you know are problems for students with, or for people with color vision deficiencies. Red, green, for example, is a common one. Green, yellow might be a problem. Pink and blue might even be a problem. It's sometimes amazing to talk to students or people with color vision deficiencies and find out what colors they don't see well and what those good palettes might be. Use multiple ways to convey information. I think this is probably the most important tip. If that information is important, use a way other than just color to convey that information. Labels, words, numbers, patterns, textures, whatever makes sense in that instance is important to help convey that information. And allow time for processing. Now, there are studies that show that time is not going to help students necessarily it's not going to help them see the color. It's not going to give them new information because they're able to look at it for longer. But if they see subtle differences in color or in shades of color, then they might be able to, the extra time might allow for them to figure out those differences. So is the answer to just put everything in grayscale? Well, grayscale can be useful. Sometimes having things in grayscale, such as pathology and histology, that grayscale can help you see the structure without the color getting in the way. For the sake of the students with normal color vision, almost 90% of our population has normal color vision color vision. So shades of gray may not be optimum for learning. We've already talked about that color does help in memory and in learning. Also keep in mind that there are a variety of levels and different types of color vision deficiencies. For 75% of those with color vision deficiencies, it's not so severe that they would need a grayscale instead of using any color. And also, for those with normal color vision, it's important to have that color to keep them engaged and to help as an organizational tool. So what aspects of color transformation are critical? First of all, consistency. So think, are the color transformations that I'm using are they consistently used across the application? Naturalness. Are these colors as close to natural colors as possible? And contrast. Are the different colored components able to be differentiated? Do I have strong enough contrast? There are more resources, more information and resources that can be found in the resource module, including links to Adobe Photoshop and VizCheck and some of these other resources that will help you with transformation of color. So the best thing I can tell you is to think about color and think about the fact that there may be students who see things differently. Use color. It's a great organizational tool for most people, but provide alternatives. Provide that information in multiple ways. High contrast is always best. In your signs, in your handouts, in your PowerPoint presentations, high contrast is best. Keep in mind, bright white pages might be too bright for people with some vision problems, so it's important to dull down the page maybe slightly instead of using that bright white background. Explain what's going on in pictures, or have the students explain it. So if there's a picture that you're showing to the class, talk about it and talk about that picture or that image together. Allow for creativity and be flexible with what you expect from the students instead of being quite as rigid with their expectations for their products. And provide layers of education. Help them along the way to see what it is. Check their progress along the way to make sure that they're understanding what's going on. I thank you for the time that you've provided to listen through these presentation modules. I hope that you've learned about color vision deficiencies, universal design for learning, and ways that you can apply this information in your classroom. Thank you very much.